tonight, we are going to dive into the terror happening inside the national parks. Lock your windows, lock your doors, and enter the alternate nightmare. I have been a park ranger in Wyoming for the past 14 years, so I have always been fairly active and enjoy being outside as much as possible. A sighting happened in a section of land called Bighorn Canyon National Recreation Area. This section of land is about 500 miles northeast of Yellowstone National Park, where everyone goes for their vacations anymore. There are only about 4 to 5 rangers assigned to this 4,000 square foot mile section of land, with most people possibly thinking it doesn't contain anything interesting. This is because the area is quite large and sparsely populated. The incident occurred around June 1st, 2012, at approximately 9:15 p.m. on an obvious night. It was on the cusp of spring and summer, so still fairly warm during the day, with temperatures in the 80s and dropping to about 50 degrees at night. My initial thought was it was 2 black coyotes running together, but these canines were at least twice the size of a regular coyote, and they appeared very muscular. I was shocked. I have never seen anything like this before in all my years working for the Park Service. While I believe there are wolves still roaming around in this area, I know they are rare, shy creatures that usually keep to themselves or would avoid people, if possible. When I first saw them, they were running very swiftly together and seemed to be hunting something. They kept to the shadows as much as possible, so they were hard to see at first. Their pelts seemed glossy black, like an oil slick in the moonlight, making them stand out more than if their coats were brown or gray. What struck me most was how large these creatures appeared, even though they were moving so quickly across the land. I know what I saw, but can't explain it. It's not easy for me to think about because of the shock of seeing such unusual animals darting across a hillside on this land. I have been back over that area several times, but have not seen anything unusual there since this happened. Quick note on the land. The land where I work is very rugged, with cliffs that are all around us, including one on our western boundary, which is called 5 Mile Cliff. There is a lot of wildlife in this area because the national forest borders it to the east, while some private ranching property exists to its north and south. I would say these animals were at least twice the size of normal coyotes. If they were, in fact, canines, they seemed muscular compared to other running animals I see. Although, come to think of it, they moved extremely fast across my line of vision, making them hard to judge. It's hard to say exactly. This is just my estimate seeing them from the distance that I did. I could be wrong, but this should be pretty factually close. I am 100% sure these creatures were real. I saw them with my own eyes. Like I said before, they seemed like something out of a horror movie, even though this area is pretty isolated, and the chance of seeing anything like that happening here is slim to none due to our isolation. We do get tourists coming through all the time, but most people are looking for Yellowstone-type encounters, like seeing grizzly bears and the such. Now, as far as them being a cryptid of some kind, I can't be too sure of that. While they were extremely large, black, hulking wolves, it's very possible it could have been a distortion of the distance. Park Ranger here. I have a story involving a bizarre entity that I saw one summer night while patrolling in Monongahela National Forest. I was checking to see if there were any campers out, and while passing by the trail to Black Bear Falls, I heard rustling in the bushes on my left side, not too far from trail. I thought it was an animal of some sort, maybe running through the undergrowth, but when I came around the final bend at U Trail Road, I caught movement out of my peripheral vision. It wasn't until after I got home that the memory kept bothering me so much that it compelled me to do more research. Now, looking back on it 3 years later, this thing is exactly what I saw that night. A deer. No, this silhouette was walking upright like a man, but had the neck of a giraffe. Its head wasn't proportionate to its neck at all. I pulled my car over thinking that maybe it had gotten into the woods by accident, while some hunters were passing through. But after looking closer, I realized there were no tracks coming in or out of the brush on either side of the trail, not even deer tracks. It doesn't make sense. It was around midnight and about 95 degrees out, so if it had been human, they would have been sweating profusely at least. I could see none, which means it didn't give off any body heat, and to my knowledge, it didn't have a form of light either. I got back into my car and sped away. If this was just an animal, that's fine, but what if it wasn't? I did some research and found several reports of bipedal deer-like creatures in the area. One eyewitness description is almost identical to what I saw. The creature was at least 6 feet tall, had a neck about 3 feet long, and walked on 2 legs like a man. The witness concluded his report with this statement. At first, I thought it might be someone in a Bigfoot costume, out hunting, or something else like that, but the whole thing just seemed far too weird for it to be that. I'm not sure what I saw exactly. You can call me Heather. I actually work in the Forest Service, and occasionally will work with search and rescue when I get the call to. This past summer, I was in Elk County working with our team when we were requested to search for a missing hunter. We all searched the area until darkness fell, and were called back to base camp for the night. As we were eating dinner at the campsite that evening, we heard screaming, and what sounded like a scuffle just beyond our campsite. One of my coworkers ran towards where he heard the screams, and I followed behind him, carrying my shotgun because it was dark. And we had no idea what was going on, or who, or what was out there, causing such a ruckus. When we got closer to all the noise, we could see that there was a strange entity, or figure. It was faceless, and making these awful screaming noises that were erupting into the night. We were petrified by what we were hearing, not sure what to make of it. As we stood there, trying to take in what we were seeing and hearing, the figure started coming toward us. I readied my gun, ready to shoot if it came too close. The next thing I know, the figure was gone. My coworker claims that he saw me shot at this thing, but I don't remember shooting at all. I must have fired several shots at that thing, though. Once it was gone, we ran back to camp. We were pretty shaken up about what we saw, unsure of what was going to happen the rest of the night. We had enough camping equipment with us, so we decided to stay in the woods for the night. For some reason, though, my coworker was adamant on staying up all night. I didn't understand why at first, but when I went to sleep in my sleeping bag under the stars that evening, I was awoken by a loud whirring noise. I assumed that it was my watch, or maybe even my coworker's watch beeping. It was pitch black though, and I couldn't see anything out of the corner of my eye, so I knew it wasn't him. I thought nothing of the sound at first, but after about 5 minutes had passed, another loud beeping noise occurred. This continued on for the rest of the night, but got louder and louder each time it happened. Finally, when I thought that I could finally take no more of it, my coworker told me to quiet down. In a panicked whisper, he said he didn't want whatever was causing the noise to come any closer to us. That's when I asked him in a whisper, "That wasn't you making the noise?" He responded with, "We're being watching right now." I reached for my 9mm that I always kept by my side, just in case of a bad situation. The noise, however, stopped. We were both terrified from that point on. We didn't sleep a wink, and noises persisted almost all night long. It was awful. We were so tired by the morning time. We left the woods as soon as it was light out, and started making our way back to headquarters. I think we were both a little relieved when a fellow coworker drove up behind us. There is such a thing as safety in numbers after all. During a search and rescue mission for a lost couple in the Colorado mountains, a strange creature was observed by myself, a fellow SAR member, and another witness. Our team was working through the area with our search dogs. As we moved into an area that appeared to be deer beds, my partner said quietly, "Dog found something." I looked up ahead, along the direction of his gaze, and saw nothing at first because I was looking at an angle where the sun was hitting him directly in the eyes. Suddenly, he began moving into some dense thickets, and, as he did, his body language began to change. He turned around and looked directly at us without a sound coming from him. There was something very unusual about the look in his eyes, a very blank stare, with a hint of confusion or bewilderment. It wasn't an aggressive look, but it also wasn't friendly. I tried to speak to him, but nothing came out of my mouth. A SAR member I was walking with didn't notice anything that happened until she saw the dog turn away from us and drop down into stalking mode, which means he's observed something worth investigating further. As we moved closer, Daniel Roseman observed what the dog was focused on. I got close enough through some thick bushes to see what appeared, at first glance, to be a very large, not well-fed, feral dog. I was about 20 feet from the creature and stood up from where I had been crouching so as not to spook it. When I stood, the animal turned away from me and began moving deeper into the thickets towards my partner, who was still looking at the dog. It walked with a strange gait, a head-bobbing motion that reminded me of seals or manatees. Then he put his finger over his lips in a shush gesture to show us what we should do. We were now close enough that if there had been anyone else around, they could have heard our conversation easily, but also close enough that our presence might startle or provoke this creature. Daniel's report continues. As I followed the trail of the creature, my ears picked up a noise that sounded like fine gravel being churned in a cement mixer. As we walked further through some tall wheatgrass and blackberry bushes, we came upon a clearing and found ourselves facing the animal. It was squatting down and appeared to be eating something from under loose rocks with its right hand. The fingers were long and slender, without any nails or claws visible. The head turned towards us slowly. It looked like it was covered in large scales, and when it did, there was an awkward moment when nobody knew what to do. We were so frightened we didn't want to make a sound. My eyes were locked onto its face, which seemed to have a hint of red or black around its amber-colored eyes, but I didn't see any trace of animal, only human intelligence. The nose looked nothing like an ape or dog's nose, more like a ridge of scales slightly above 2 pinholes for nostrils. It tilted its head in what seemed to be an odd gesture, almost bird-like. I couldn't help thinking this creature is very curious about us. A few seconds went by, and then it did something that surprised me, even though I had been standing there staring at it for several seconds. The creature started making guttural noises while turning towards us, slowly, looking first at Daniel, then me. Then, it revealed a mouthful of teeth that looked like the jagged rocks along the coastline after they've been battered by waves. It continued to make these growls. Then finally, the creature turned away from me and started moving up out of the gully, its back slightly arched in a dinosaur-like walk. As it disappeared into tall grasses along edge of road, I stood mesmerized. My reaction was neither awe nor fear, but rather all mixed with confusion over where this animal fit into our world's classification system. I work in a national park that is known for its prehistoric burial mounds. I've been working there about 1.5 years now, and was out doing my rounds on the prairie surrounding the park, when I saw something that really took me by surprise. There's not much out here except prairie, trees, and wildlife. Last night, we had quite a bit of fog as well. It was late at night, around 3 a.m., and as I was driving towards one of our campsites to make sure everything was okay, I saw something that made my heart skip a beat. I slowed down as I came close to one of our campsites. It's usually deserted this time of night, but sometimes we get campers looking for solitude, and they'll pitch tents where they're not supposed to. I slowed down and was almost to the site when I saw something out of the corner of my eyes, moving across the road in front of me. I jerked back on the steering wheel and hit the brakes with both feet. It was a little deer that had been walking in front of me, but it didn't look like any deer I've seen before. It was very large, probably about 6 feet at the shoulder, and it walked upright on 2 legs, like we do. It looked right at me as it crossed in front of my truck and then continued across the prairie in a long, graceful stride. There's no way that deer could walk like that by itself, and what got me is that its front looked far too human. I stopped there for a minute or two, debating whether or not to get out of the truck. I finally decided not to, in case it was something much more dangerous. I wasn't prepared to see this tonight, and had not had near enough coffee yet to handle such a thing. When I got home and told my wife, she said you probably just imagined it happening. I guess I shouldn't be surprised she didn't believe me. After all, who would? I felt myself trembling as I drove away from the site, stopping at each campground along the way, before finally going back to my office. It must be an elaborate prank, or something. There's no way that I really saw a deer come walking out of the woods, walking bipedally like people do. I'm not sure how to feel about it. Honestly, I wouldn't call myself a wildlife expert, but I know for a fact that deer do not walk on their hind legs like that. They don't look at you with a cold, calculated gaze like that, either. Help me answer the question. What did I see? Was this supernatural, or did I just not get enough sleep before my shift? In the late morning, a park ranger spotted a strange creature in a forested area, near a large river. It was approximately 50 feet away from him. The first thing he noticed was its legs, two long appendages that seemed to have no joints and which hung down from two thick, hump-like shoulders. The creature stood still, wearing some type of animal hide loincloth. Its head had 3 horns, each one different in shape and angle. He said it was like something out of science fiction or horror movie special effects department. He estimated them to be between 10 and 12 inches long, yet very slender, with sharp points. The witness said he'd never seen any animal with horns like these. The ranger's attention was then drawn to its eyes. It had large, black, scary-looking eyes. The head seemed very elongated in shape, narrower at the top, facing forward, tapering out wider, toward the shoulders. This is where he noticed the shoulder hump aspects. He could not see ears or a mouth, only 2 small nostrils on either side of its head, which blended in perfectly over pale white skin. Over areas above its prominent cheekbones, its head face angled downward, in what appeared to be staring directly at him. He managed to make out body proportions through the animal hide garment. It appeared to be a stout, short, and bulky figure. From head to foot it was standing approximately 5 feet tall. Its arms were twisted or folded behind its back. He added further that he thought it could have been some type of primitive man. The fur loincloth seemed very old-fashioned in appearance, maybe from a tribe that still existed out there, in the forested lands of today's world. Something straight out of The Land That Time Forgot. You know what I'm talking about. He said that after staring at him without moving, that creature then slowly took 2 steps toward him and vanished into thin air. It just disappeared. The ranger described this as happening so fast that it gave him a headache. He was stunned and didn't know what to make of it. The ranger is a very reliable witness. He did say that when he arrived at his station, he noticed that it took him longer than usual to enter the code to open the electronic gate to park property. When asked further about his history, the park ranger has a very interesting past with the paranormal. He went on to say that as a kid, he felt like there was an entity in the home he grew up that somehow attached itself to him. It was always there in the darkest parts of his life, waiting, watching. As he got older, this entity began to manifest itself more and more. Physically speaking, there would be times he would be up late at night, stricken with insomnia. He would hear tapping on his windows, growling outside, all of it. This went on for years. He said there were times he would see these demonic figures standing outside his house in the early morning hours. While on the job, this man has also seen several Bigfoot and other strange apparitions, all while working. Nick, as he calls himself, not his real name, but you understand, has a family history of poltergeist activity, hauntings, possessions, and more. He seems to be a paranormal magnet, and having him tell me about his sighting seems very normal to him. He's used to it. Digging a little deeper, his grandfather was heavily involved in occult practices and satanic religions. During his teen years, Mick was involved in witchcraft and other dark arts. After becoming a Christian, he said all the hauntings and paranormal activity stopped. He still saw things that weren't there sometimes, though. As I spoke with him more about these topics, he told me how he used to visit an occult bookstore, often as a teen, where they used to sell body parts for rituals and such. Of course, they were just fake body parts, but used so that those who practiced spells could practice the dark arts. I have no idea about the validity of that. That's just what he told me. It was very strange to see this park ranger talking openly about his satanic experiences. He has stated again, since becoming a Christian, that his activity and sightings have dwindled entirely. Mick is a 47-year-old man who is a very honest, hard-working individual. He has no reason to lie about any of this, making his account all the more valid. When he tells his stories of not just his cryptid sightings, but his paranormal experiences, you can just see the change in his body, and we're living these horrific experiences. We were out looking for some clues, following up on the recent sighting in this area. The previous report came from an older man who has lived here all his life. He swears he's seen Bigfoot before, but always at a distance through the woods or behind trees. This time, he saw it up close and personal. Now, what was weird about that day is that I had just an hour earlier received a call about 2 Bigfoot sightings here in Colorado Springs, Colorado. It was around dusk, maybe 6 p.m., and we were almost done with our search when my men spotted movement along the southern border of the park. We thought it might be deer or bears, so I went to check it out myself. There was nothing there. There was something moving in the bushes, just a short distance away, but I couldn't see what it was. When I got closer, I saw there were some feathers scattered on the ground and a few more black feathers hanging from a nearby tree. I immediately called my team to make sure they were all okay. There wasn't any movement around us, but we stayed on high alert for a while. And then one of my guys heard some strange squeaking sounds coming from not too far off. It didn't sound like an animal though. It sounded like these horrific roars. We really couldn't tell where it came from. We kept our weapons close and continued searching, all while we looked for anything else strange here in the park. So, there might be more than one cryptid here. We didn't see anything else. No movement in the trees or bushes. I've seen most of the wildlife around here, so it wasn't any animal call I'd never heard before. I sent out a report after we got back to camp, but then this morning, I looked on your website and saw that there were 2 reports about flying creatures across the country. One was near Denver, Colorado, and the other was in Arizona. I mean, they're both way too far away from where we are, but I can't help and think these cryptids are somehow connected. What is going on? It's some kind of migration that has started. Please tell me you have some idea what this might be. Here are other things I know from other rangers who have also spoken on this issue. In California, for example, several rangers had reported seeing large, bat-like creatures flying overhead. They went to check it out, but when they got there, they were supposedly attacked by these same creatures. There had been reports written up about it, but most of the details in the reports had been whited out. Also, in the state of Texas, not too long ago, someone reported seeing a creature with horns fly off into the distance. This was around one of the national parks, residing in eastern Texas. I forget the name. Sorry. I guess I'm just looking for help on this one, guys. I really feel like we might be onto something big here.